Ta-da! And welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, you don't need to like, follow or subscribe. I just put the videos out there where I can. Have a holly jolly great time doing so. Now, today's video, basically what we always wanted here, where our two main lines come through and we come in to a section where we've got a siding, and I always wanted some sort of an engine shed. Now if we just take a moment here to look at these pictures, this was the typical sort of engine shed I think would probably best suit the layout. So the Hornby Scaledale range, as you can see, something from the GWR line would certainly match up with the station that we're using, and I think could work really, really well. I didn't want to get too busy down here. I just always wanted to have a shed. I wanted that industrial look that we probably would be seeing in the 70s and 80s, you know, adorned by halogen floodlights and things like that.
And a big thank you to my brother for acquiring, once again, doing some research. Now I remember in Whyalla, the Steelworks, BHP as it was known in the 80s, of course, when you drove by, there was just a sea of floodlights all over the place. And I took great inspiration from that. Of course, the sheds that were across from the signal box that, of course, we did end up modelling, and we talked about in an earlier video, there were some sheds in Whyalla located in the traditional sawtooth shed fashion, and that's what would have been more applicable to this. However, the sheds aren't there anymore, so I can't draw a lot of inspiration, but the colours and the shades of the weathering are kind of what I'm trying to go with here. Just for interest's sake here, the particular pictures that I was chasing of Whyalla, and particularly the Steelworks, 9 out of 10 times if you do a quick search, they're standing on the same lookout point on Hummock Hill, looking back over to the pellet plant. Look, it's a great vantage point, and it is a good photo, but it always seems to be same. Of course, one of the greatest memories I recall is as you drove into Whyalla from Port Augusta and seeing the Steelworks on the left, you would see the big sheds adorned with their floodlights, which was great inspiration. To achieve the photos, my brother kindly drove out to what was the old Whyalla Railway Station. Now, the passenger building itself has been demolished, and here are some remnants as seen in these pictures. What's interesting to me about this is the actual line itself is not a disused line, which, as people have seen in some of my previous videos, I always focus on things like that and pick up details. However, this particular section of line is still used to move steel products and other various materials backwards and forwards onto the Australian rail network. So it really does bamboozle me that they just cut the passenger service altogether. Sure, maybe the numbers weren't there, but the infrastructure's still operating, and it seems strange that they just demolished what was a wonderful facility. I still have a few rare photos of that, and we'll probably look at that another day. But particularly the era, which certainly just screams out 70s, 80s, is fantastic. And it's a wonderful spot. And as you can see from the photos, we have managed to grab some wonderful images of the Steelworks. Albeit a lot more trees have come along, and thanks to LED lights, it doesn't quite have the Christmas tree glow that the industry used to have, but here we are.
So I wanted something that was going to fit, and unfortunately those ones you've just seen in those pictures are just not quite what I'm doing. Wonderful if we're storing our steam trains and what have you in there, but if a Hi-Mech or a Class 37 were to roll in needing a little bit of maintenance, this is not quite what I wanted. So the idea was a lot of the sheds that are available to suit 2 or more lines coming in. I really just wanted a single one. Again, I don't want to take too much away from it. So I thought, what could we do? So after a lot of searching, I managed to discover, ta-da, the Bachmann or Bachmann, depending on the way you like to pronounce it, the Scenecraft. So again, like Hornby, the Scaledale, this is a pre-made model, which suits me just fine. I don't mind adding a little bit of weathering and maybe a bit of a brand name or something across the side. We'll do that as required, but this fits the exact image I'm looking for. For those of you playing along at home, of course, this is of course the Bachmann Scenecraft range, and we are looking at the model 44-126. And although there was another one I looked at where the side entrance was open and you could peek in from the side, and I was going to hang some high bay lights, this really just ticked some boxes, and I think I can make this work for what I need. Importantly, it certainly will just drop in and fit where we need to do. But what I really loved about this is what seems like the hard work is done for us, that the lights are already there. They're not actually wired up. So I do want to have lighting on this. As I said, I want working floodlights and things like that. So that's the next challenge. Ta-da! The next box arrives. Kirby, Volmer, and most importantly, Weiss or Viessmann, as you may pronounce it, manufacturers of lights, of which an LED strip that can run across the middle, a series of other lights that we'll talk about later which aren't for this project, and most importantly, some different floodlights and or fluoros that we could be mounting accordingly. So that's what this video is all about today. We're going to get this out of the box, we're going to modify it, add some specific type of lighting to it, and see what we can come up with here. Because remember, it is a shed that follows through. It's not closed in the back, so it certainly will have the opening down the end here, which is where we come over to the canal. So I really think we can create something in what is a rather small area. The other side was always just going to be a bit of a siding, albeit just for storage of locomotive or some wagons. And or I'm experimenting with something maybe to do with a crane. Again, I really am starting to run out of some room there, but we'll delve into that another day. Today's video is about getting this particular building illuminated. There was no one in Australia that had this model. 5 suppliers from the UK, and I believe Rails of Sheffield won the day on this one and have provided it. So why don't we just open it up quickly, and we'll have a little gander at what we have inside and see if it managed to make the trip over to Australia for our purposes. Fantastic. This was the other thing as well, which I think we're going to come back to in a later video because I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do, but this is absolutely fantastic, albeit really would have been better if we were going to use this side with the yellow for the opening. But that's nothing that I can't paint myself. They're pretty much identical. It just looks like there's a little more detail with what would be a roller door or sliding door or what have you that they're using. What I did love about this model, as you can probably see, is the inside of the fluoros, which is something we might come back and illuminate, and then again, possibly not. Again, while there's a side door here, you can see it's quite solid. I'm not even going to attempt to cut it open. It would be sitting in this orientation. I see a floodlight that's not sitting great, but that's okay. So it would be sitting here. That's magnificent. And you can sort of just get enough light is there, not necessarily that they're working on something. We may add something across the side on this half to give that illumination from the bottom. Again, we're going to run a strip across the top. And the thing is, the height and the way it's shaped is, even when you come down, hence why I won't go with the high bays, you really aren't going to get that type of effect going on. So as a result, we're going to give that one a pass and do what we can do. Important part for me is our external floodlights. In this situation, of all the hunting, and I know there's plenty of bargains to be had from some of the sellers there on eBay and Alibaba and all the rest of them, but really when it comes to floodlights that actually really look like floodlights with their mountings and all the rest, these are just about impossible to beat. The theory for some of this is going to stay. I'm not going to disturb it. They won't be on, but the front and the back are very important. What we might do is leave this one. It may have been a disused one, and then mount 2 new ones across the front on either side. I think would look super smashing. And then we're just going to have a single one on the back, which will probably replace the single one that is there at the moment. Most importantly, I really did want to stick some of the traditional looking fluoros that you would have seen sticking out on some of the side ones. It's mostly just an image of what I always typically had seen. I always think these are just a fraction too big. However, they do give a reasonably good lighting effect. Even though it is just a single LED and that diffuser can be a little bit wild sometimes and it's too defined Hence why you will well know that I'm a huge fan of the Woodland Scenics Just Plug lighting system. And the reason more so about it is the fact that all the work with the LEDs that scares a lot of people with doing this, it's already been done for you in the system. And most importantly, it's the fact you get this dimming control to get those lights exactly where you need. Gone are the facts you need to use things like DCC Concepts. They usually have a resistor board and you choose the resistor that's giving the right light output. Throw that rubbish straight away in the bin in your complicated soldering. Just go here and we can dial it exactly where we need it to get the perfect hue of light. Because often, especially with the pre-made buildings, whether it be Scaledale or whether it be Scenecraft, is if you do put internal lights on and turn it up a bit much, you're going to get light bleed come through your plastics and even some of the composites. So as a result, the ability to just tone it down a bit, fantastic. Let's get this thing wired up and see what we can come up with. Well, that's been 48 hours now that we've left our glue on those front and rear floodlights to dry. And let us have a look what we have come up with. Again, for those of you interested, we're using the Viessmann 6333 HO floodlights. I'm quite happy, although obviously you've got the little round bit of the SMD LED that's in there. And I'd probably diffuse that a bit more. Again, we're going to use a dimmer, but I'd like it to have more of a square looking output from it, but that's okay. So we've got our wires, which we're going to internally glue and get out of the way from the inside. I don't think that looks all too bad. Regarding the installation of the floodlights, again, it's nice and simple. They're all pre-wired for you to just add on to whatever system. They do make indication you need to drill a 2mm hole. Now, if you're working in some form of plastic or perhaps balsa wood, this isn't too bad. However, because this is kind of that composite stone-like material, stone's not the right word, it eludes me now, but it's this type of a ceramic or whatever that's being used, it's obviously quite a bit thicker. And once the 2mm hole's in, it was a little bit of a struggle feeding. You'll have to feed the resistor, the diode down one side and then come back for your resistor. And I did have to use a pair of pliers to just gently support one end while I'm trying to feed the other end. If you are working with any Hornby, Scaledale or Bachmann Scenecraft type of material like this or building, my advice to you might be if you can get a 2.25mm or a 2.5mm. What I also did, I did just take a trusty marker, and when the hole was made, I just bipped it straight in. That way, any of the little edges around that might not get covered because of this bracket that we're using, the little black diffuses it well, and you'll never even know. Of course, the glue comes in, seals everything up, fantastic. And you could always touch it up with a paintbrush. We don't need to do any of that. We're keeping it nice and simple. Other one that was there, we'll keep there because maybe it's a utility one they could have used or a security one that comes on at another time. You'll also notice the front here. I did take a bit of safety yellow paint with a sponge, dripped it on and rubbed it. And I've got those yellow sides the way the back came that was yellow. Albeit theirs, they put it on that top row. As you can see, I did not. And I think it's turned out very, very well. The next lights we have got an LED strip that we're going to place inside in the middle. Again, because of the way it's done and the heights in that, it's hard for you to come in and sort of get a good look in, especially when it's going to be sitting in place. So that's why I get a nice lighting effect. And look, if it was one of the other sheds that was opened up a bit more and had the higher gables with the roof, yes, I think doing the lights, the high bay lights that dangle down would really give great look. But we can't even see coming in, and the windows on the side are frosted. So this is a very quick and easy way to get out of it. And the other one we have are the more traditional looking fluoro type tubes that would go on the side. My only key concern with this is the color of these is a little bit not quite right. This is where I think I might just tape them up and give them a quick spray with the galvanize to get a slightly better look to those. So while we need to go and get these painted, we may as well lay these in now and let them start to dry. For those of you playing along at home, this of course is the Viessmann 5086. So that's 42 warm white LEDs, which is what I'm going for. Look, I know you do pay a premium for their lighting products, but you really are saving money in the long run. They've got the support. The products are really built for what we need to do with Model Railway. Robust, strong, and you know they've selected the right components to run the distance. When I read a sentence in there that says something along the lines of, this LED model uses SMD LEDs to produce light matching the lamp model, low heat buildup and power input, nearly unlimited lifetime of the LEDs, and so no more change is required. They do come with a 2-year warranty. Now that might seem interesting because when we do buy LED globes and things these days, they come with a biblical amount of lifespan. However, as you may have discovered as I have, that's not always the case. Some are built differently, and just because they say one thing, the lifespan doesn't make them the be-all end-all. So if you're putting some installations in, and in the future something goes wrong, particularly with my overhead LEDs that we're using here, I went with something good. I come across a lot of the cheap stuff, and while it is good for short terms, it will not go the distance, and if it's a tricky installation, it's going to be just as tricky again to uninstall and reinstall. Now, as you can see, this strip just has the black and red on there, and of course in the packaging, you probably noticed falling out by my feet, was a series of resistors. Let's have a quick look at what they're doing. Obviously, they're indicating about how you can cut these into different lengths. Again, we're just going to keep it the whole way. And of course, they're going to talk about their proprietary system that they use for connecting and plugging in and driving this. Well, I think you and I know that this all looks just a little bit intimidating here. And the level of my expertise is knowing that once we've got this connected to the building and it's sitting up, these leads aren't going to be all that long to come down the board and be connected up underneath. So I will have to extend these 2 leads, so I'll probably do a little spot of soldering there. But joining 2 wires together is no problems for me. That's not tricky, and you can always choose whatever connection types you like to join them, including using linker plugs or the Wago connectors or whatever tickles your fancy. So let's not lose any sleep over the simplicity, because I think we can just return to working on the principle that we can just plug them in to our controller. Let's just apply some power and test that out. I don't know how to do that. Are you sure that's all incorrect? Hey, me, pay attention. When you plug this thing in, you just have to plug the Just Link directly into the expansion hub, and we won't dim it. It gives me a nice light output, okay? Oh, I'm still talking. Okay, Joseph, when the paint's dry, talk about connecting that to the 12-volt rail.
Just a quick note regarding the wiring. You will just need to wire all the lights discussed in this video directly to your 12-volt accessories bus. I did mention the Woodland Scenics Just Plug lighting hubs with the dimmers. That is still an option for some of you. However, these are pretty much bang on exactly where they need to be when plugged in, and I guess that's a key consideration when spending the additional on buying a quality lighting module.
We now move to those side ones, and we have 4 of these. These are the Viessmann 6089 HO industrial LED lights. Now, what we're going to do with them, we're going to put 2 on either side, but we're going to give it, we're going to take this rather light grey sheen out of it, and we're just going to quickly go over it with a bit of galv spray, just to get it in that traditional galvanized look that these lights are in. We could just take over a little bit of
black wash or something like that to dither them down. I think it's only fair we try and get a bit of a better color balance. Once again, all the hard work is done, pre-soldered, directly plug and play into whatever system you choose to use. We've let our glue dry at the moment for the LED strip down in the middle, and we've soldered our lead-ins for that, and also popped a drop of glue because they're all going to feed down on this side of the wall, and we'll put a neat hole through the board. So it's starting to take some shape. Now we're going to pop on, now that the paint has dried, galvanized spray on these lamps at the moment. They still have the tape on them. Again, we'll leave the existing static decorative lights they put in place. I think it'd be great to spend a moment and retrofit them with the small LEDs, but you're going to have a whole world of problems even trying to do that. So again, these are really only looking like they'd just be a security light that's running in the night. I would prefer to have them lower, and I'd love them to be a lot smaller than what they are, but here we are. So what we're going to do is identify where they go, and I'll just go through with you how I'm drilling these holes. So to drill these holes, you could take your 2mm. As you can probably see, these lights have a slightly thicker entrance that we're going to need to create. They also have an additional support for mounting and sliding in and out of the buildings as necessary. They recommend, as opposed to the floodlights, which had a 2mm hole, they're recommending us to use a 3.5mm hole on this occasion. Got the bin below us here. There is no science to what we're doing. You can use your little pin type drill to get this in, but we've got to go through, as you can see, the thickness is reasonable, but it's not hard work, and just take your time on this one. It'll work out quite well. I like to go in between two pieces of corrugate. And one touch I like to do, as always, I like to just take a black marker. You probably won't see it once it goes in, but it just gives just that little bit of a bleed around where it is going, and saves coming back later and touching it up with paint. But looks not too bad. I still think it's far too big, but we'll make that work. I managed to pick up a couple of these 3D printed Whirly Birds that they will usually stick on the roof. Gives a nice way of passively cooling a building and promoting airflow. Of course, they were all flat, so a quick trim with the side cutter will give us a bit of an angle to mount them on. Now here's a top tip. I'm using a Vallejo Umber wash here. Now you only need to decant a drop, and then I'm using quite the fine tip brush here. And if we just come in on the section, now I've just put in the Whirly Birds and I'm waiting for the glue to dry. But if you just pay attention here, I'm just adding a little bit of detail around the roof where we'd get these little droplets, and the rust and the weathering would wear down, particularly on the corners. So what we do is we do take the brush, work on the corners, just run it through the groove of the corrugate, but also just a few more. There's no right or wrong here. I'll work a bit more on the center here. You can actually just grind it across the top here, because then what you could do is you're just going to take the brush and just work it down, and it'll sort of bleed it off as it goes along and thin out as you go. You don't want to do the, well, you do whatever you want to do. I don't want to do the whole area. See, if I bring the brush down like this, that looks quite heavy. Now I don't mind that it's heavy, because that's the look I'm going for off the corner. But once I'm happy with it in a few bits, then I can take the brush, just work it down. Just a few bits, just to give it that little detail I think it needs. If you want to build some other areas that are building up, so be it. I can't do much until the glue dries up on my Whirly Birds, but I think you can see it really starts to add a little more character to the top of that roof line there. Girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you our completed, wired up shed. Well, girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you so much for joining me in yet another video in the series. It's been an absolute pleasure showing you the process of what we've done and the simplicity you can do in just taking an already made model and adding just a few little bits of modification to really let it sit in its own place. Now, of course, my hands are still a bit covered in paint and I'm still waiting on the glue to finish drying on our wonderful Whirly Birds. However, that's going to do it for this video. I would have preferred the fluoros to be a little yellower. Of course, standard fluoros are of course in the white color. So I think the balance works out well, and the effect we got from the LED strip inside glowing through these semi-transparent windows is magical. I really think this has turned out absolutely fantastic, and with a little bit of research and planning, you can end up with something wonderful. Now, as you can imagine, we still have plenty of work to go on the groundwork, because we're now getting ready to start working on this canal thing. There's been an initial pour just to create a bit of a seal, and we're getting ready for the main attraction. Coming up in a future video, I've got big surprises. So girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Stay safe. Toodles.